Welcome to If These Walls Could Talk. I'm your host and super CEO, Lindsay Liu. Joining me today is Marc Supcoff, the founder and principal attorney of the law offices of Marc H. Supcoff. He specializes in construction law, commercial litigation, and real estate transactions. Needless to say, Marc's not only seen a few things, he's worked on cases that have set precedent. Today, we'll hear from Marc about an unpleasant underground surprise. Thanks for joining us, Marc.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Nice to see you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this building and this property.
Sure. About 20 years ago, I was working at a law firm. We represented a construction manager. I had done work for this client before, and they were notified by an owner of a development project that they worked on that there was a plumbing problem. And the owner of the project was a major newspaper publishing company. And the problem that they reported to the construction manager was that, unfortunately, the waste pipes were all backed up and smelled terrible, and it was driving the workers crazy. Now, in addition, they also notified the design engineer for the plant, this brand new plant, color printing facility, and we were in a bit of a pickle because the plant itself worked great. The presses never stopped running, and this was at a time when people still read newspapers. And there was one problem though with the site that everyone knew about from the get-go, and that was that it had really, really poor soil. In fact, it was more or less a marshland in Queens, New York. And so to compensate for that, because you're going to have these really heavy printing presses, they designed the plant to be built on piles. Now, piles are kind of like big sticks, fat sticks that you stick all the way down into the ground until you hit bedrock. And they were made of concrete, and they worked. And that foundation didn't move an inch. But the waste pipes, they weren't supported on piles. They were under the slab, tied into the slab with hangers. Like think hanger for your jacket, more or less like that, a little bit bigger, but not really that big. And so the parties that were contacted couldn't figure it out. How could a brand new multi-million-dollar plant fail like that? And so what we did is we had to hire all kinds of experts to try and diagnose the problem. Well, we knew the problem, but we didn't know what caused the problem. And so we hired mechanical experts, we hired plumbing engineering experts, we hired soil experts. We had the foremost soil expert, I think he was from MIT, in the world. And what we did is we looked at the design, and then we actually opened up the slab, the foundation, to look at the pipes. And when we did that, we saw some things that were very, very interesting.
To your untrained, unexpert eye, you were like, this ain't right.
Something did not look kosher. What we found is that the pipes had separated from the hangers, and in some places, the pipes had actually broken. Now, keep in mind that this was a gravity system for the pipes. So those pipes have to maintain a certain flow. And if the pipes come off the hangers, they obviously can lose their slope. And so what we found is that in addition to that, because this was a marsh, the water table was rising from time to time, and the water would rise and the pipes would be all over the place. And there was one other interesting thing that we found. The design called for styrofoam to be placed around the pipes, and we didn't see any styrofoam. So, of course, the owner was saying, see, construction manager, you didn't put in any styrofoam as per the design. But then we thought about it and we spoke to our consultants, and it turns out that styrofoam and water, they don't mix that well, or maybe they mix too well. and they disintegrated all the styrofoam. And so the styrofoam was like all over the place, but it wasn't around the pipes. And so we came up with our theory of the case that it was largely a defective design. It was a design that couldn't work, and it didn't work. And on top of that, the owner knew about the conditions that would cause that kind of problem, but to save money, I guess, didn't put all the waste pipes on piles. An
Pipes on
amazing,
pile.
exactly. It was just a storm of bad decisions. Nevertheless, this was a difficult case to present to a jury for decision making. This case did end up going to court. The parties, obviously, because of the amount at stake, they had to rebuild everything, put it on piles the way they should have done the first time. We ended up having to go to court. The contracts allowed for the cases to be brought in court. We spent a year doing discovery depositions, taking all the fact witnesses, all the expert witnesses. The trial lasted for 3 weeks.
And that's
Uh,
long in for those that are not lawyers. Is that a
it
long trial
is.
period?
It is, especially for a complicated case like this one in construction. What I learned is it's very difficult to get jurors to focus and to understand complicated design and construction issues. And when you go for that length of time, some of it goes in one ear and unfortunately may come out the other ear, unlike the sewer pipes, which were
Which were
not not
leaking everywhere.
not functioning the way they were designed. Um, in fact, what happened by the end of the case, after the jury rendered its verdict, uh, the judge thanked all of the jurors for their service, and he said, "You are discharged, but if you'd like, you can stay behind for a little bit, a couple of minutes. The attorneys are going to now come back into the jury deliberation room, and you can talk to them in private about the case." And so the case uh, ended, and the, the attorneys made their way back into the jury deliberation room. It's just off the corridor in the back. Uh, we were really excited. I was a young lawyer, going to get to hear from the jury. And first thing I noticed when we got there was the place looked a bit like a pigsty, kind of like students that had just finished studying in their study hall in the dorm for finals. Everything was all over the place. There was food and wrappers. Oh, it was after 6 p.m., but there were no jurors. The jurors had left. They'd all gone home. They'd done their job. So, uh, if you have a complicated case, construction, real estate, I learned, try to avoid a jury trial. It's a mess. No pun
Literally.
intended. Exactly.
And we were like 3 weeks, not one more minute will I stay.
Apparently that was the sentiment.
Um, so you had told me that this case ended up with the New York Supreme
It
Court.
did,
How
yes.
does a case end up there versus in other kind of municipal courts?
Right. Well, the lower court, the civil court for the city of New York, only handles cases that have monetary value up to $50,000. This case had exponentially more damages that were involved. So that would put you in state court. The only other alternative would be if you had a federal claim or some other more technical basis to get into federal court, which we didn't have. Believe me, I would love to be in federal court, but almost all of my real estate cases and construction cases end up in state court. And the Supreme Court is your general jurisdiction, kind of hears all types of cases, including this one for breach of contract and negligence and all that good stuff.
So it sounds like The building did resolve the issue. It was probably very expensive, notwithstanding even just the legal fees and all of that.
Yeah. So absolutely, the matter did ultimately get resolved after the jury verdict. In addition to the owner suing the construction manager and the engineer, um, we third partied into the case the plumbing contractor. Um, and so eventually the parties and the responsible insurance companies were able to to settle the matter after the jury verdict. So it's interesting because cases get settled at all different junctures, but most people don't realize that cases also get settled after a jury verdict, and that's what happened here.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm guessing, can you share? Was the verdict in your favor or not?
So it was a multifaceted verdict. So the verdict against the construction manager obviously was not in the construction manager's favor, but as I mentioned, we had claims against the plumbing contractor as a third party, and that claim got resolved by the jury as well. And there also was a pre-trial settlement between the owner and the engineer. The contents of that I'm not at liberty to disclose. So the case did ultimately get resolved, and all of those systems that were moving in the breeze there under the slab had to be rebuilt with a redesigned system, I believe, on piles so that the utilities were supported by their own piles and never moved an inch again.
So it is possible to build plumbing on top of a marsh, but you just got to do it the right way.
That's exactly right. That's probably the most important lesson that we learned from this design.
Measure twice, cut once, something like that. They talk about that. Yeah.
That's right.
And do you know if this printing press is still in use today?
I believe it absolutely is. It's a, uh, a major color printing facility. Um, and so, to the extent people are still reading actual newspapers from this publisher, they're likely to get it from printed there.
I had to go find a newspaper once. I worked at a company. We were in the Wall Street Journal. We wanted to go get it in print. And I think I walked around New York City for like 2 hours trying to
That's funny.
find more than two copies of
Yes,
it.
I've had that same problem. I occasionally want to read an actual newspaper, and it's very hard to find one on the street.
Hotels. That's where you can get
Oh,
them.
okay. Good
They
to
always
know.
carry them. Yep.
Good to know. I'll be traveling soon. Maybe I'll get to read a newspaper.
There you go. So, question for you, with the extent of these types of investigations, how do you find experts? How do you find the leading expert
Right.
in that topic?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. This was a fascinating kind of a forensic problem for all of the parties. And so you start usually with relationships that you do have. I had been working at a law firm that did a lot of design and construction defense. And so we contacted some of our existing clients who are in that field. And then they oftentimes can also recommend someone for that soils engineer that I mentioned from MIT. I don't remember exactly how we found him, but it was probably through one of our clients. He was more of an academic, and I remember going up to Boston to meet with him. So it's really relationship driven. If you're fortunate enough to have them as your clients, then they can also be experts. Sometimes we just go to I wanted to say the phone book, but no one uses phone books anymore. But we have like directories of experts and firms in certain fields. So for this particular case, we had the mechanicals, we had the plumbing, we had the soils, and then we actually had to hire laboratories to test the pipes and to evaluate the soil conditions. And our consultants usually were able to recommend labs that they had worked with. So uh, that's how we do it.
How do you keep it interesting for juries when it's getting real technical like that?
Well, this was a really seminal case for me. It came 20 years ago, but like I was saying, I learned a lot, as the junior associate on this case. It's very hard to present a case that's complicated like this to the jury. And I think the answer to your question is to keep it short and
Not
to
3 weeks.
not, if possible, not 3 weeks. Sometimes you can't help it, but to make things as simple to understand as possible. And so that's the real challenge for the construction lawyer with the jury, is to break down things that can be seen as very complicated and make them easy to understand and as simple as possible. And if you can do that and keep the jury's attention, then you may have an opportunity for them to accept your theory of the case. But if you lose them, or if for some reason they don't trust you or your witnesses, you're in big trouble.
Okay, I actually have one more question. Did you have
Sure.
to do voir dire? I've seen a few legal dramas.
Yes.
I know my way around some
Yes.
of this. Did you want somebody with more of an engineering, technical construction background, or did you not want them on the
Oh,
jury?
absolutely. That's a great question. And we absolutely wanted people that were highly educated in the fields of engineering, architecture, and construction, because our whole theory of the case was that this was an unconstructable design, and basically a design bust. And to the extent that even if you were in construction or knew about construction, that would make sense, because if a contractor can't build something and it knows that is a problem, and so that would help us. So yeah, unfortunately you can't get all engineers and contractors, but uh, you wanted you wanted people with highly technical backgrounds.
Perhaps this will make some of our listeners want to engage in jury duty in the future.
Absolutely. And come to think of it, I'm past due for jury duty myself, so
You
I
said
could
it out loud. We'll see what happens next. You put it
flag,
into the universe.
flag that.
Yeah. Um, was that I'm assuming that was not the last story that you've ever had to deal with involving sewage pipes.
No, funny that you should ask, because we were recently retained to work on a sewage pipe case. This one is hits a little bit closer to home. Literally, it involves a home sewage system that was uh, disrupted by repair work that the utility company was doing in the street. And you might ask, we're just getting started on this one. We have to do our forensics, but you might ask, well, how could work in the street damage a homeowner's waste system? Well, what you might not know, Lindsay, is that here in the city of New York and in every other place where there are public sewers, the system connects with the public system in the street. And so you have this lateral pipe. Oh, I'm getting super technical now. But when you're working in the street, if you're not careful, you can break that pipe. And when you break that pipe, the old saying, it doesn't flow downhill anymore. So it can back into the
Got nowhere
we'll,
to go.
nowhere. We'll have more on that in our next
I was
podcast.
going to say there's a new spin-off podcast we're starting called If These Pipes Could Talk, so tune in for
Yes,
that.
yes, that's the
And
one.
And a PSA on that, as somebody that kind of manages my own investment properties as well, flushable wipes are not flushable. If people do that, you will also have a backup on your hands in the home.
Yes, I've seen those warnings.
They really are. I think what I was reading about, because I got deep into this topic, because I was like, oh my God, how can this industry exist and call themselves flushable wipes? It seems like such a misleading thing for consumers. And it actually says in the packaging, they basically, like, I think one of the CPG companies was like, well, it can technically flush down the toilet. It just doesn't go down the pipe.
Yeah, it sounds a
They're like, it's
little
flushable down part of it. not the whole way.
Little misleading advertising there.
A little misleading. Yeah, I think they've had to do some payouts before. I feel like I need to make my claim now.
All right.
Well, thank you, Mark, so much for sharing your story with us today. How can people get in touch with you?
Thank you. You can contact us at designandbuildlaw.com is our website, and you can reach us at info@designandbuildlaw.com.
Perfect. Well, that's today's episode of If These Walls Could Talk. Super is the AI-powered communication and workflow tool for property managers. To learn more about Super, visit us at www.hiresuper.com. To share a story you have for a future episode, email us at hello@hiresuper.com.